And welcome to Emma of TV Movie Club Now Playing. I'm Beth, and I am 50% of the Made for TV Movie Club podcast, where we review and recap TV movies from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Here on our YouTube channel, we review current TV and film projects and interview professionals in the entertainment field. As our listeners of the podcast know, we love all things TV and movies from the late 20th century. But this channel allows us to show our love for more modern entertainment. With all that said, let's begin. Today I'm going to be talking about a film called Hundreds of Beavers. It is a film that came out in 2022, and it was filmed in rural Wisconsin and Michigan over 12 weeks in the winter of 2019 to 2020. It had a budget of about $150,000. And for those of you who are fans of Hundreds of Beavers, you may recollect another film that the filmmakers made called Lake Michigan Monster. That had a budget of about $7,000 to put in perspective. Now, I was so lucky to be able to view this film at the Oriental Theater in Milwaukee. If you have never been, if you ever find yourself in Milwaukee and you love old movie theaters, I highly recommend going to see a movie there. It is such an experience because it is such a beautiful old theater, and it is really reasonable to see a movie there. It is also reasonable to get concessions there. They also do serve some alcohol if you want to have a beer or wine while you're watching a movie. That's a great place to do that. It does show a lot of independent films, but it does play some more mainstream theater. When I was in college in the 90s at UW Milwaukee, I used to go see a lot of independent film that's there. So I'm so glad that this is a theater that is still so vibrant and is such an important part of the Milwaukee community. Recently, I just went down there last week to see a documentary called The Librarians, which we are going to talk about in a future episode. I'm going to have a panel to talk about that one because it's a documentary that really requires discussion. But this movie preceded the Milwaukee Film Festival because it actually was at the film festival in 2023. But the producers had a panel during this year's discussion because this film was, as I said, was made with a budget of about $150,000. They never found a distributor, so they've been distributing this film themselves, and now it has grossed over $1 million. I think it's over $1.5 million. So that's really significant for a really small independent film on a very, very, very small budget. So the director is Mike Cheslick, and the writers are Mike Cheslick and Ryland Brickerson Cole-Tooth. He plays Gene Kayak, who is the main character of this film. This film has only 5 humans in it, and I say that because there are a lot of other creatures in this movie, which I'll talk about in a couple of moments, but I want to go back to sort of the plot of this movie. And I say that loosely because this film moves around a lot and it goes into directions that you really don't expect it to go. I think that's one of the fantastic things about this film, but it's really hard to sort of peg down a plot line because it moves so much. But it's about a Applejack maker named Gene Kayak. It opens with Gene he's drunk at the beginning of the movie, and a beaver or a couple of beavers actually take down his Applejack storage unit and then light his house on fire and his cider farm, his apple farm, to make the cider. And Gene finds himself in the middle of the forest without any resources or any shelter. And that's sort of the beginning of the movie, and he has to sort of make it on his own from there. It kind of turns into Gene Kayak becoming one with the wilderness because this does occur during the winter time. And in the same process, he also ends up learning how to become a hunter and somebody who is able to live off the land, also a sort of a fur trader, if you will. And then it kind of turns into a little bit of a love story because he finds himself in love with the fur trader's daughter. So he ends up becoming a love interest, if you will. So, as I said, there are only 5 characters in this film. Gene Kayak. There's a furrier, there's the merchant, the fur trader merchant, and a master fur trapper, and then we have the Indian fur trapper. All of the other characters, and there are very, very many, are people in costume, very inexpensive costumes. There are hundreds of beavers. There are also dozens of rabbits. There are coyotes. There are raccoons and fish. There's frogs. There's all kinds sorts of wildlife. But one of my favorites in this one is the Indian fur trapper's um, horse, which is really comical because it's really just 2 men in a horse suit. And perhaps you've seen these in like a comedy. I can't even think off the top of my head a TV show where they've had these, but I've seen it before. One really good example would be the movie Top Secret with Val Kilmer, where there are two. Can't remember if they're horses or cows, but there's 2 men in the suit, and they're trying to fit in with the other animals so that they can escape. And that's sort of the same kind of costume, only a much cheaper version. One of the things I really loved about this movie is it does not stop making fun of itself. It is fully aware that it has a very, very small budget, and it uses that to its advantage. Um, so as Gene becomes a trapper and a hunter and a fisherman, animals, although they're mascots stuffed, in costume, humans in costume, when they die, they get X's on their eyes, and it's just really comical. This movie has been called slapstick comedy, and that may be the genre that they are calling it, that they understand it to be. In my opinion, it felt more like a live action comic book, just because of some of the qualities that they use reminded me of sort of, I don't know, maybe a little bit Bugs Bunny cartoon, that kind of thing. There is a lot of, or like when Gene is climbing a tree, he uses this really um, animated gesture, and he's just kind of going like this, but he's moving up the tree, and it's really comical. It's very funny. Um, I also forgot to mention when I was talking about the theater is that it was completely packed. There was not a single open seat in the house. It was completely sold out that night, which was amazing. And over half of the people had already seen the movie before. And I know this, and I know about the budget because before the movie started, one of the producers came out to talk to the audience and talk a little bit about the filming of the movie and the production and how much it cost and how much it's made. And so he asked who's seen the movie before, and people raised their hands. So it was really great to see all these people who are huge fans of this movie. And it was really great to be in an audience that was a part of that, because it was, I honestly would call it electric. Everybody was laughing. Everybody was enjoying themselves so much. And that is really at the heart of what this movie wants to do, is entertain. And it's so silly that you can't help but really enjoy yourself. Now, one of the things that wasn't super clear to me right away, but then became clear as the movie went on, is the setting or the time of when this story took place. And it became clear that it was the 19th century, but in the very beginning, it wasn't super clear. So once I understood that, I kind of had a much better idea of what they were trying to do with him trying to live out in the middle of nowhere and live off the land. Personally, we have property up in the UP, my husband and my mother-in-law has owned a cabin up there since the 50s. So seeing all this really beautiful scenery, but how desolate it was, did not surprise me at all. If you've ever been to the UP, you know that it can be very desolate. And I think a lot of the United States was like that back in the 19th century, when if it wasn't in a city or a small town, there was a lot of desolate land, and the UP continues to be that way. So that's why, to me, it wasn't exactly clear when this movie was set. But once I realized it, I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. So it's really just a series of accidents that end up working out for Gene Kayak. He doesn't know how to fish. He learns how to fish. He doesn't know how to hunt. He learns how to hunt. He learns how to evade the coyotes that are there. He also finds the lair of the beavers. sort of becomes enemies of the beavers. And then when all the beavers are dying so that Jean Kayak can marry the fur trader, the fur trader's daughter, the fur merchant's daughter, if you will. There's a little Sherlock Holmes character that comes in. He's a beaver. He comes in to try and solve the mystery of what is happening to all of his fellow beavers. And it's really funny. It is hilarious because there's also a trial later on. And one of the things of note about this film is all of these things happen, and there is not a single word of dialogue in this film. It relies on music. It relies on grunting and groaning. It relies on facial expressions. It relies on body movements. It relies on physical humor to make the point that it's trying to make. And I think that's part of the beauty of this movie. Like I said, it does not take itself too seriously ever throughout the whole film, but it's also very funny in such a simplistic way. And I really enjoyed that. Like, you don't have to think too hard to enjoy this movie. And everybody in the audience was laughing along. And when you get to the point where you find out why it's called Hundreds of Beavers, everybody just exploded and clapped and laughed. And it was such a funny, poignant moment. And everybody enjoyed it. People who've already seen the movie, people who didn't. And when the movie was over, everybody was clapping. People stood up. There was a standing ovation, and people talked about how much they loved the film and talked about how much they loved Lake Michigan Monster and talked about, and it's films like that that bring a community together, even if it's a community of 200 people for an evening, that makes people feel joy is really at the heart of what we need right now in our culture. And it gives us a way to create community and find a way that everybody can sort of enjoy something together. And so I say that because I think if you want to watch this film, it is streaming. You can watch it on Con TV and Fandor. Both of those are streaming it currently. Of course, that changes. So in a few months, it might not, but you can always go and find it somewhere. And I recommend that you go and watch this film and have a viewing party. Invite some friends over and just sit down and watch this film and laugh about it and talk about it and decide for yourself what you think is the silliest gag in the movie, or what is the funniest thing, or how is this a film that has no dialogue and yet tells an entire 2-hour story and uses music to do that as well. It's really an accomplishment. It's so smart. If I had any sort of criticism about the film, I felt there were some scenes that just went on a little bit too long, or some of the running gags went on a little bit too long. I felt like this movie could have been cut by at least 20 minutes, and an hour and 30 minutes I think would have been much more appropriate for the film. Having said that, I'm not angry that I watched it and it was almost 2 hours long. I really did enjoy it, but sort of towards the end I kind of felt like, now we need to know what's going to happen just so that we can all, kind of be done with the movie. I don't know how to say that. That's probably not exactly what I mean to say. But my point is, it's a really delightful film. It's really interesting. I really recommend that you watch it. If you can see it in a movie theater, go ahead and do that. Like I said, it doesn't have a distributor, so I don't know if and when it might actually come to a mainstream movie theater. But there are independent movie theaters across the country that have shown this film. It has shown in film festivals, including, like I said, 2023 in the Milwaukee Film Festival. So you can find this film out there, and I really recommend you doing so because it is unlike any film you've ever seen, and it is totally worth the time it takes. But again, I think you should have a group of people to watch it together because I think it adds so much more richness to the story itself.